Welcome back, and ladies and gentlemen, you heard Thomas Koenig talking about the role of interconnection for sustainability, how it enables it, how it empowers it, and ultimately how interconnection is sustainable. Let's deep dive a little more into energy networks, and for this, I'm joined by the three gentlemen you see on stage. Let me start to introduce them real briefly. We have the Senior Vice President of Energy Networks in Europe at E.ON, that's Johan Mörnstam. Thanks so much for taking the time to come here. Then we have the Chief Technology Officer at E.ON, Benjamin Jambor. And we have, Sebastian Weber. I messed it up. My mistake. I did that in the break already. I feel like the name matches you better. My mistake. And then lastly, we have the Director of Regional Grids at Westnetz and the CEO and founder of DigiKoo, which we will hear about in a second. And that is Benjamin Jambor. Now I got it right. OK, let me start with Ben. So Thomas said that renewable energy and energy networks are two sides of the same coin. Can you explain that statement a little bit more, and how does that translate to your everyday business with the grids at Westnetz?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Thomas explained, you can't talk about the distribution grid without talking about all the renewable energy system and all the regeneration of energy coming from the renewable side. So when we at Westnetz look at the grid in these days, this is not a linear thing, and it was in the future and it was in the past. And when we're looking in the future, we will have an increasing number on questions to our grid to get connected of PV, connected on all the wind turbines and all that stuff. And of course, we have to really do something about the balancing because it's not from a just normal regeneration side coming to the grid, coming to the consumer, and that's it. So we have more than a prosumer, we have more issues in the grid. And when we see what's coming up in the future, so the energy goals, the sustainability goals of Germany are something that we have to realize. We at the grid side have to realize most of these energy transition stuff. So we are looking forward to any kind of digitalization and, of course, bringing more regenerative energy to all the people.
Mm-hmm. And that has to do with your company.
Absolutely.
DigiKoo, and we will hear about that in a second. But to you, Johan, first, very simply speaking, there is always a producer and then there's a consumer in electricity. Ben has just talked about the producer side, and Thomas referred to the consumers, and there are new ones. There are electric vehicles, heat pumps, energy storage. What development do you expect on the customer side, the consumer side?
I think that's a good question, and actually we have already started to see that development. I think that, as we heard earlier today, we are in the era of electrification, and we can see all across the countries that we are active in that there is a significant increase of customers that wants to connect to the grid, but also to increase the capacity. And if we look at the drivers going forward, we see that industries, they want to electrify or decarbonize their processes, and one of the most efficient ways to do that is to electrify the processes. But we also see new customers coming in, like the data centers, the battery factories, and they will also consume a vast amount of electricity and need, of course, then a significant amount of capacity. And then last but not least, we also see in the beginning of the electrification of transportation, so normal e-vehicles. But there I also believe that we only see in the beginning of that. We will also see the decarbonization of heavy transportation. And actually, when we speak to Traton and Volvo and other car manufacturers or truck manufacturers, they project that by 2030, 50% of new sales of trucks globally will be battery electric vehicles. So I think we are in for a quite steep increase of the request of capacity from the grid.
Okay, and this is just as a follow-up. These are the Energy Innovation Days. So I have to ask, what role does innovation play in the sustainability transition?
Yeah, I would say everything is about innovation. Given the complexity of more production coming in, more renewables, that means more intermittent production, but also more small scale. So it means that the production will be in many more places, distributed, local. And then on the consumption side, when you see this vast increase of electricity consumption and the capacity requirements, we also see that the complexity of the whole energy system is increasing. And to master that complexity, we need really to make sure that we have innovative solutions in place. And we have already started. So we have, for example, a large-scale battery solution in Hungary that we are developing to basically utilize flexibility out of the battery to increase the utilization of the grid. We have introduced the digital capacity trading platform in Sweden to make sure also that we can utilize and actually connect more customers to increase the utilization factor on the grid there as well. And we also use drones to more efficiently surveil our grid and make sure that we have the forest management in a more efficient way. And last but not least, we are also looking into how we can utilize data in a common way to make sure that we can also have self-healing grid and use artificial intelligence. So I think we have already started with a lot of innovative solutions.
Okay, so there's a lot E.ON is doing already in that respect. But to you, Sebastian, you're kind of in charge of more of the technical aspects of this innovation game. And there seems to be sometimes some confusion that digitalization is innovation. And obviously there's a lot happening, as we just heard. But what do you see the role of digitalization in the energy transition?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think Thomas mentioned it quite intensively in the beginning, how we depend on modernize, digitize, smartify our assets, our entire energy system. And we look at E.ON today, we hold quite a responsibility, serving more than 50 million customers. And we operate an electricity grid about 1.4 million kilometers and additional 150,000 kilometers in gas. And already today, we have more than 800,000 distributed energy producing assets connected to this grid. And this is just the beginning. We heard the numbers that billions of more assets will join the grid. And now it becomes the question how to manage this complexity. And this is where innovation will happen in the space of IT, in the space of digitization. And Johan just mentioned the importance of thinking more about data, thinking about how machine learning can help us to ensure that we have a stable supply on the energy side and really can deliver to our customers a stable energy grid at the end of the day. And today we see that also computers get challenged. They are really getting to the edge what's possible with classic computers to do all those computations. And this is why we started to think and work deeper in quantum computing, which is very early in the beginning of the journey. But we see it today, given the number of parameters, the number of nodes and players in a network, in a grid, this is really a big demand for new thinking and innovation in the space.
Yeah, sounds like a massive transformation that's ahead. Can you give us a little bit of insight what that means for your job as the Chief Technology Officer? I mean, that must become more complex too.
Yeah, I think it's really about keeping the balance of doing the fundamental work and driving innovation on the same side. I think we will speed up our digitalization effort over the next years, and we definitely have to. And more important is that we really think end-to-end when we talk about digitalization. It's not just doing one thing digital, it's really having the spectrum, thinking about our people, what does it mean for them, for our customers, partners, operations as well, but also on the new solution side. And to give you a few examples on the basic fundamental work we need to work on and will work on is driving our modernization on the application landscape. So we still have data centers. We want to move them to the cloud by end of 23. This will drive flexibility, scalability of our systems, but also will contribute to a lower CO2 emissions ourselves when we move into those green data centers of a public cloud. Another area where we need to think about is all the smart meters and their rollout. We have a slow start in Germany, but still we have millions of connected devices today across Europe. And this is another area where we need to connect those to our platform and to get the signals into our systems to understand what's going on in the grid, to really observe the energy flows, another area. And on the total other side of the spectrum are those new solutions I think Ben referred in the beginning to. And we made recently a major acquisition, or we get a major stake of GridX, a German-based startup. And they are exactly in the space to do energy management on a microgrid level. For example, load management for charging parks. The challenge here is that it's limited by the physical connection, what you can do in a charging park. So you need to balance the available power across the cars. And they have a pretty nice solution. So you can also plug in new assets like batteries or solar PV power, and then have a focus on this charging park to have a very good energy management. Those are the other sides on the extreme spectrum driving really innovation in the journey ahead.
Exciting times for a CTO. I'm sure your job won't get boring anytime soon.
Not yet.
Yeah. Ben, you're not only at Westnetz, but there is an in-house startup called DigiKoo, and they offer database services to other grid companies. Can you confirm what Sebastian just explained?
Yes, absolutely. So at DigiKoo, and we are a very small internal company, but we are trying to outline what Sebastian said, come to life, and really get a clever solution to the guys that are working on the grid stuff. And there is a lot of work to do. When we look at now our digital twins or data models, then we have nearly a static one. So there are not so many digitalized assets in the grid. We have no, as Sebastian said just before, so much smart meters roll out in Germany and stuff like that. So the complexity in these days is that we have to manage a grid in the quality we do it in these days, and there is about a power outcome of 10 minutes per customer per year. So this is a very less amount of minutes you are not fully connected to the energy grid. And we are, of course, very proud of these just 10 minutes, but we want to make better. So the customer is in our focus. We see what's coming up in the future, and we see that we are running around creating digital twins that are now coming from static data, where more and more IoT data getting into the place and getting to a bigger, more actual digital twin. And when I come to my DigiKoo side, this is part of our story. So we have a very clever solution combining socioeconomic data with grid data to make grid planning and these shortage prediction or stuff like that more easy for all the grid people around. But we have some other products in place, like Sebastian mentioned before. We have Inga. Inga is a very clever solution where we see shortage in the grid, and we have to talk to the CPOs, so all the guys that run the loading parks, the loading spots on the streets and stuff like that. And we really have to do something like a cut in the maximum load for these peaks. And we created a solution that is fair. That is fair in this case, that we are going to cut off something, and the energy that is there, we go and put it on all the CPOs that are working on this part of the grid. So there is something more coming up from our side with GridX and the DigiKoo staff. Of course, we at E.ON are working on the whole digital twin stuff and bringing all the regenerative assets into the grid and managing the demand from our customers. This is something we do all day, and I promise you all we do this tomorrow better than today.
Thank you. That's great. Johan, you're responsible for the international E.ON networks. Is the situation in Europe on a European level similar to what Ben just described?
I would say that the starting point for the different countries are quite different. We heard here that Germany does not have any smart meters. In Sweden, we are currently rolling out the second generation of smart meters. So I think we need to make sure that we take care of the situation in the respective countries. But I think there is no doubt that there is a significant requirement for heavily invest in the grids to make them smart and also to be an enabler for the energy transition also going forward. The anticipation is basically that there will be investments until 2030 in the DSOs for 400 billion euros across EU, 400 billion euros. And a lot of those will, of course, go into smartify the grid, but also to make sure that we level out and making sure that we have a European perspective to this. And I think in the digital era, it's very important that we can actually have a similar way of working across Europe. That means that we need to standardize and we need to make sure that we have common set of rules, but also that will enable us to roll out and scale solutions very fast. We have already worked on basically integrating and connecting the different countries. We have one program connecting Czech and Slovakia, where we are basically investing 180 million euros. 50% of that is coming from EU funding. And that is to make sure that we connect countries, but also that we increase the quality level of the grid and also smartify it. And I also believe that with innovative solutions, we can also be able to enable sector integration and clever solutions for our customers. Sector integration means that we can utilize flexibility, basically to take over surplus of renewables production, power production, and maybe store that into gas and then reuse it to create power when that is needed. But I would also say when it comes to data centers, for example, we also can provide solutions where we take care of not only providing the power and the connection, but also take over the excess heat and recycle that into our district heating systems. So I think innovative solutions really will help us to make sure that the energy networks will be a platform providing the necessary capacity, but also that we, in combination with all the capabilities that we have across E.ON, also can create innovative solutions for our customers.
So you touched upon the connection between different countries, and that obviously that has a political component, as you mentioned. So Ben, what are your thoughts on the political framework that we have here? Does this support your digital ambitions?
So in these days, it's all about data, and our political frameworks helps us in a lot of cases. But coming to this data stuff and the exchange of data and the transparency of data, even if we say GDPR is a very precious asset for us, and we will fully comply to that, we have to do something about all these data stuff, not only in Germany, regarding the whole European Union. So when I at E.ON, I'm in nearly everyday exchange with any other grid companies across the E.ON universe, but even outside of our E.ON group, I talk with all the energy networks guys from other companies, and we try to make things better. And from my point of view, we have to work more closely together in Germany, but also in Europe, and learn from each other. So as Johan mentioned before, there is a big battery program running out in Hungary. So we at the German side have to learn from what they gather there on information, what they learn from running, from building all that stuff, from managing with the battery side, the grid and stuff like that. So coming from the exchange of information, it is not so future-oriented as I wish it was.
Okay.
When I'm coming from the Westnetz and from the DigiKoo side, we cannot rely just on the data that is coming from our digitized asset and from the smart meters. And this is why E.ON choose to buy the major stake of the GridX company, because we really need to know more about the energy consumption behind the meter, not to steer something or to cut something off, but the more we know about the customer behavior, the more we can get better in steering the grid, in bringing the amount of energy that is really needed to fulfill the demand of the people to the place where it is needed. And to be fair, when there is a big football game, the people around Dortmund or other cities are not at home in these cases. And we need the energy not where they live, because we need the energy where they are. And this is something we have to know. When there's a football game, we can do some prediction with a calendar where all these big games are in or stuff like that. But we really have to connect the grid more to the demand of the people, more to the data of the people. But of course, we have to look at the GDPR issues and fully comply to that.
Okay.
And then, yeah, connecting to your question about the political perspective, I would say there is a political, or rather a regulatory perspective on this. And the first is really that the regulator and on a European level need to ensure that there is a fair return on the investments, really to attract the necessary investments that needs to be done. And connecting it now to innovation, I think the regulatory framework also need to make sure that it incentivizes all the DSOs to really put in smart solutions and get remunerated for that. So there is a clear incentivization to drive innovation also from a regulatory perspective.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Sebastian, You also mentioned before that there is a contribution of digital technologies towards CO2. You mentioned cloudification, moving to the cloud. How do you think digitalization and sustainability are interconnected in that respect?
Yeah, I think they're definitely connected, and maybe, for example, what we can do with cities. So right now, 70% of generated CO2 emissions happen around the urban areas. So in cities, we have definitely an opportunity to improve the way we manage energy. And one project we are doing in many areas right now is called Smart Quad. So we think about optimizing the energy management on a microgrid level, on a quarter level within the city. So what we do together with partners and also with residents, as we learn they are prosumers, so becoming business partners somehow, we think about how we can optimize for a quarter the energy flow, that we connect PV, for example, battery charging points, and then have really an optimum for the city quarter. Also having ideas and influencing parameters like Ben mentioned about the behavior and what is the situation this quarter. So we can really ensure that we limit potential losses of energy flows and really have an optimum for this quarter. And I expect more things coming up in this area. And if you ask, will this happen with technology, with digitalization? Yes, definitely it will, because there will be no human being managing all those energy flows. We need really fully automated systems to be scalable for that kind of solution. And this really definitely moves us into a more sustainable world.
So automation that will lead to a more sustainable future. I want to look at something that came from the audience. A question to Johan. You mentioned scalability as an important element to become carbon neutral. What needs to happen first on the utility side to reach this target?
Yeah, I think we as a pan-European player, I think we have a great opportunity to scale across the country. So I think there are three different dimensions, I would say, the assets, the processes, and the systems. So we have already started to standardize and see what kind of assets can we actually scale across Europe. And also, when it comes to processes and systems, I think they are very tightly connected together. You can't standardize a system if you haven't a standardized process there. So I think we are working across those three dimensions. And that will be an enabler then for scaling.
Thank you. Maybe we can ask this question to the round. Tracking data, new customer behavior. What are you as E.ON doing, and you all, doing to engage with the customer in this regard to make energy valuable product and service? So this is about consumer engagement, because ultimately a lot will be driven by them and their behavior.
Yeah, happy to share some thoughts on this one. I think at the end, it really depends on generating value for the customer, right? So why should I share my data, right? And so you need to give something in return. When we go back to the discussion about load balancing, to optimizing, maybe also the tariff you have, then there's an opportunity to discuss if you share me your data when you're at home or not, that we can, for example, sell the data or the energy to other customers and give you a lower price in the evening, then you have a win-win situation, right? So it's getting more complex because we really need to understand who needs which kind of data to provide additional value for the customer, right? But I think the trick really is that it's a network of companies and partners which require on those data flows. And this is where it gets more tricky at the end of the day. It's not just us and the customer, because we need to send a signal back to the next part of the energy grid. And this is where it gets more complex from a legal perspective today.
Right, and
to make it fair, like Sebastian said before, it is not about grabbing all the data. We connect several houses to one connection line in the ground, and we need all that data in common at this connection path. Let's talk it in this way, and we don't need to know that in this house lives 4 people and in the next one just 1 or stuff like that. So we are not going down to each house. We need the data in a summary of all these houses connected to one line, and it's enough for us to steer the grid.
Okay, so
I would say 2 perspectives. I think you explained it very well. From my perspective, it is one external perspective and one internal perspective. We can use the data to really provide a high resilient grid, which means a higher uptime to the customers. And then it's about using the data to provide additional services, new innovative solutions for the customers, which I'm pretty sure that the guys here around me will help us to sort out for a good customer experience.
Yeah, maybe you have time for one very quick closing question to you. Actually, what do you do at E.ON to work in a sustainable way yourself? So you personally, in your day-to-day work.
Yeah, first of all, personally, I am full electric, so I drive only e-car. But if you look professionally, I would say that we do quite a lot. We have a tough goal to basically take out 75% of our carbon footprint by 2030. That means, for example, that we are managing energy losses or electricity losses by taking them down, but also to make sure that when we need to buy for the grid losses, that we also compensate them for carbon. We also are active in UN's environmental program, ecological corridor management. So basically we are now creating biotopes below 13,000 kilometers of our power lines across Europe. And to get that a bit more tangible, it's 100,000 soccer fields. So it's quite a bit. And here we aim to spend a couple of double-digit millions until 2026. So I would say that we are doing quite a lot on this front.
Awesome.
And then I would say the most important thing is really to make sure that our power grid is an enabler for the energy transition, because that means also that we can help all our customers to decarbonize.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Johan. Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you, Ben, for being here and taking the time. We'll be back at 11:15 right here.